Welcome to the Heli Academy podcast. My name is Pavlo, I'm a student from Ukraine. Please enjoy the podcast. Будь ласка, насолоджуйтесь цим подкастом.
Hey, welcome to the Heli Academy podcast. This is going to be our second episode in a three-part series on student success. It's Jared and Eric today. Say hello, Eric.
Hello, how's it going, guys?
Yeah, we're pretty excited. This is probably one of the things that actually caused me to want to do this podcast in the first place. On orientation day, I got into the orientation and I wanted to tell all the things that they should do in order to make themselves successful. And it's just impossible. And not only that, it just, so much of it just flies right over your head on day one. It's like drinking from a fire hose, right?
Yeah, it's a very overwhelming day, and that's a lot of information to kind of process and store away. But yeah, exactly like we were saying, that's really was my heart behind wanting to do this 3-part series too, was like, hey, let's go back to that and let's put it on a platform where students can come back to it and process it and think about it and have something to chew on as they go through their training, because your training is your professional development. You're also learning how to be a professional. And so I think that's a very, very valuable part of the process. And I think what we're going to talk about today is extremely valuable and something we get questions on frequently.
Yeah, you're right. And learning how to learn and recognizing that you're going to continue to learn throughout your career, right? It's not just going to stop after the school finishes here.
Constantly, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and start us out? What's the first topic we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so kind of the theme for today is talking about that transition from being a student to being a pilot to being even a CFI. This is something that we get questions on a lot, and what potentially are we looking for when we're hiring, potentially new CFIs, and this is something that is a frequently asked kind of interview questions from our students, because this is something that they want to know. And so I think this is great, because what all the things that we're going to talk about today are valuable, not just during that transition, but if you can start to practice these things in your training, it's ultimately going to lead to you being more successful as a pilot in general and as a professional in this industry. So these are all really great things that we're going to talk about, and one of my favorite items to discuss, because that's ultimately my role here, is to develop our CFIs and our students into professional pilots, and so it's really, really great. With that, I think the most valuable thing is, especially for students early on, is learning how to develop your work ethic, right? A lot of students come in and they have a lot of different backgrounds. They have a lot of different educational backgrounds. Some of them really know how to study. Others, they're going to have to learn it, and that's okay. But I think the focus on it and learning how to study and to process information is really important. So developing like a work ethic, right? Motivation is great. Dedication and discipline is better, because that's more long term, and that is something that you have to practice and you have to learn, and that doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of goes along with that is prep, right?
Yeah.
Being prepared for whatever flight you're going to go on to, and that doesn't stop here at school, right? That's going to go on to your next career. Being prepared for the day, having the tools that you need. Maybe looking at the weather ahead of time, knowing some information before you get there is going to really help. If you just come to school and you expect your instructor to tell you everything that you're going to need to do for the day, you're going to be starting on your back foot.
Yeah.
Right. You got to take, as the student, you have to take initiative and get out there and try. And maybe you prepared incorrectly, and that's okay. Right. You'll learn that through the process. But definitely being prepared ahead of time, getting all the information before you even come to school, for that matter.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a difference between, waking up, 20 minutes before you need to go to school and be there. That's easy, right? it's hard to wake up an hour and a half before you need to leave to make sure that you are properly prepared. I mean, you've worked a bunch of different jobs. I'm sure you've seen pilots where they just kind of rock in, and then the guys that come in and they're professionals and they're ready.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it really makes a difference too. Mm-hmm. Right. There are the pilots that get there. They get there early. They grab their coffee. They start looking at the weather. They start looking at the helicopter. And then there's the guys that scream into the parking lot, throw it into park, run out to the helicopter. And, I think maybe I've shared this story, but it kind of relates. But I had a situation actually where I was in a rush. Happened to be in the middle of the day. I had already flown the helicopter. I actually flew it to the downtown heliport, landed. And normally, I didn't tie the blades down on, this is on a Jet Ranger. And I, went in, sat down. We got a call. This was, I was flying the news helicopter. We got a call and I ran out to the helicopter, hit the starter button. Turbine started spooling up and I thought, well, that's weird. The blades aren't spinning. And, thankfully no damage was done to the helicopter. I closed the throttle, got off the starter button, got out, felt so stupid in front of my photographer and untied the blades and then, went out for my flight. But, that's just just kind of an example of the type of thing that can happen when you're rushing, when you're not taking the time, when you're not getting out there ahead of time, when you're not thinking about things ahead of time. Anecdotally, that's another reason why we always do our final walk around, but
absolutely,
that's a different topic for a different day, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I love that. I tell all my students and I tell all my instructors, like, I'm not going to rush. Like we don't rush. I'm not going to rush. And there's things that I need to do before I'm ready to fly. Having that cup of coffee in the morning, right? You can't do that if you were supposed to leave 5 minutes ago and you just walked in the door.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to be able to do those things well. And as a pilot, it's very distinct when you're feeling rushed and then when you're feeling comfortable and confident. And that takes time and preparation, and you got to be there early and be there for it. And if you're still feeling rushed at the end of the day, then you need to get there even earlier.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's important. How you feel is going to affect how you fly and your decision making.
So what are some of your antidotes for feeling rushed? Like, what do you do for yourself?
I definitely will feel it in my body and how I'm going through my processes too. I like to be very methodical, and when I'm going through things and have a specific flow. And when I start to feel like I can skip a step and say, hey, that's good, and I'm a little bit behind, so I need to do this. Oh, that's a big red flag for me. I immediately stop myself.
Yeah,
I'll take a couple deep breaths, and then I'll say, there's no clock, right? The aircraft needs to fly when the aircraft is ready to fly, and not before that. And so we have to slow down. And ultimately, if myself or my student are late, then we don't get to fly as long. But it is part of the process, and we need to make adjustments. I mean, that's part of being a pilot, right? If you identify that there's an issue or an omission or something in your flow, right? You need to change it. That's really important for us to do, right? We can't make mistakes again. We identify our mistakes and we correct those mistakes, and we make adjustments to how our practices and our flows and our procedures. And ultimately, that's what keeps us safe, because every pilot is going to have things that come up, and they're going to go, the 1 in 100 event just happened, and now I need to make adjustments, and I needed to make adjustments so that the 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 doesn't happen again. We're all going to experience those things, and I think it's really important. So, for me, when I start to feel that, I start to kind of identify. It's all standard stuff. Like, it feels the same way every single time for me. I start to have the same thoughts in my head. Oh, I don't need to do this. I can just go. It's fine. Ooh, right? Complacency sinking in.
Yeah.
Right? Overconfidence sinking in. Hey, those are big red flags, and, impulsivity. And it's like, ooh, all of it's coming together. And, no experienced pilot is going to sit here and tell you that they don't experience those things on a regular basis. but being able to stop and being able to, you know, go back to your checklist, go back to your procedure and really be disciplined not to, that takes practice. And that's something that you got to learn. And I think that's a career dedication thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. You know, for me, it's one of those things, and I've said this to quite a few instructors that I've flown with and other people. I asked them the question, how much time do you think you're saving by rushing? Like when you go, how much earlier are you going to be taking off, hitting the starter button, turning the key, whatever it is? How much earlier do you think is possible by rushing?
Yeah.
A minute? 2 minutes, maybe? You know, like, is that really worth missing something?
Yeah. And how much extra risk are you taking on?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're rushing. What the chances of you missing something go up exponentially.
Exponentially.
And then you feel dumb because you're like, man, you know better.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's an important lesson for any pilot.
All right. Funny question here. And you got to answer truthfully.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten into the helicopter and forgotten your headset?
You know what? Probably.
I know. I
probably. I not off the top of my head, but I have more vivid memories of forgetting all kinds of other stuff.
Like what? Let's give us an example.
I was going for an IFR flight and I forgot my iPad. I've forgot the key multiple times. We got Key Cafe. I've forgotten the key multiple times. I've forgotten all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, checklist usage, you know, if it's possible to make the mistake, I'm sure I've made it. I've made most of those mistakes on that checklist, missing something.
But I think those are the moments that we need to say that's a red flag.
Absolutely.
Stop. Reassess where we're at.
Actually, yeah. How did I get here?
How did I get to the helicopter, sitting in the seat with my seatbelt on without my headset?
Absolutely.
What caused me to get there? And I think that's really, really valuable. And another thing is, I think watching out for other pilots next to you. You know, we're out here on a flight line, and your fellow students are you know, spooling up next to you. You know, this is you know, we got to help everybody out.
Yeah.
Right. So if you see somebody else in that mode, like rushing, and you see them kind of frenetic, maybe next to the helicopter, I think it's important as pilots to take a second, walk over to that person, and say, "Hey, you okay?
Yeah. Are
you feeling rushed? Slow down."
Yep. Oh yeah. The young CFI especially kind of maybe borderline running, fast walking down the ramp, and it's like, hey, you're good. You're good. That aircraft's waiting on you. Yeah. Right. You're gonna be fine. And take a second, take a deep breath. And you know, I go on company training flights with CFIs all the time, and they're, you know, everybody makes mistakes. And every time you're under a little bit of stress, and being rushed is definitely going to put you under stress, you're going to make a mistake. And so, you know, I got a nervous CFI and they might miss something, or they might do something. They might change their flow, not unintentionally, because they are feeling that anxiety. And that's how mistakes happen. And so it's just, hey, slow down. It's good. We're going to get everything done today, and we're good. So take a deep breath, do what you need to do, and, you know, operate in that comfortability range where, you know, hey, I'm a professional and I am being a professional, and ultimately you're going to have good flights if you stick in that setting.
There you go. All right. So this topic kind of started with preparation, right? We got to be prepared, get here early, not rush. What else? What are some other tips and tricks we have for these students?
You know what? Learning to work as a team. I think this is really important. Because if we think about our personalities as pilots and as students, you know, I was at the safety course a couple of years ago when I did it, and it was really interesting. The instructor stood there and he says, "Hey, I want to congratulate everybody in this room." And we kind of looked around, and this is how he opened. And he says, "You're all type A, and you all have personality things that are going to get you in trouble in your career and in flying helicopters. You're all very type A. Congratulations, right? That's ultimately what might get you hurt one day. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so, I think that plays over because we can kind of have a natural air of competitiveness in this industry and flying helicopters. We all want to be the best. We all want to be the guy that's able to do these things.
I think that's kind of a nature of helicopter pilots.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, that's the type of person that wants to be a helicopter pilot.
It's in all of us. Absolutely. But, and especially in this environment for students and for instructors, and when you get into other operations, that competitive nature can actually be a divide in team building. And ultimately, there's not many operations when you're working all by yourself. You are going to work with a team, and being able to do that is so incredibly valuable because it makes you better.
Yeah,
it does. And so learning to work as a team, I think, is really great. I am all over a CFI and my CFI group when I start to feel some competitive, natures coming out. Because that's not the culture that we have. We have a culture that's going to support each other, that's going to encourage each other, that's going to learn from each other and each other's mistakes in a open and empathetic and compassionate way, right? We don't ever put anybody down because there's enough work for everybody right now in the industry. There's such a need for pilots that we don't need to do that. And what we'll find is you talk to people out in the industry. And I was having a conversation with a female pilot, and she's got 10,000 hours or something like that. And she came from an operation that was extremely competitive, and it actually affected her training because the instructor that was checking her out felt that he needed to compete with her for the work and the jobs, and so she didn't get very good training because obviously. Terrible. She was a direct competition. And so I think that's really important. We have to be able to put that down, and we have to be able to encourage each other and create an environment where all of us are getting better. And for me, that plays massively into my hiring decisions.
Yeah.
Right. You get one bad egg and it sours the whole group, and it makes, we want to be good to work with, easy to work with. And we're a team, and there's plenty of opportunity for everybody. There really is. And I think the more experience that I've gotten in the assistant chief and the chief role, like I'm more and more excited to have that next generation and my students be better than I ever was, right? And to do it better and to give them better opportunities and for success, and like I want to see them be better than I am and I ever was. Like that's my drive, and that's my goal.
That's definitely the goal. It's interesting. So many things come into my mind when you talk about these things. One, during the interview process, maybe a little look behind the curtain here, but one of the criteria that we look for in an instructor is fit in the family. Are they going to fit? And that's not just like, do they look and talk the same way, but do they work together with other people? And then the other thing I think about is one of our core values as a company is collaboration. And the reason why we have that core value is because we need to work together in this industry. It's so important. I remember you were telling me that you were talking with a graduate a while back, and he was saying how difficult it is actually to get external load training done properly because of that competitiveness.
Yeah.
Because typically the guy that's going to be training you is another line pilot that you fly next to, and he doesn't want you taking his gigs.
Yep.
So he's going to give you as little training as possible, or something like that. Maybe you can expand on it.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's when you get into aircraft, and it's a combination of a couple of things. Absolutely, they do not want you to take their job, so they're not going to give you that high quality training. That's and terrible. Also, they might have been in the, doing login work for the last 4,000 hours, and they haven't been instructing. So you can get a big variety, especially in that kind of discipline. You can get a big variety in your instruction for sure. And yeah, when you have a guy that's like really not interested in you being successful because he wants to be the best. I mean, gosh, there's no possible way that, you're going to learn what you need to learn and be able to operate safely. And it's just, really we're wasting time and money in that situation. That's really sad. It's
given the industry a bad name.
It is. We can do more together.
Yeah.
Than we can, putting it all on our shoulders. And one day this is just the natural process. It's the next generation's turn. Right. And yeah, like I said, it's important for us to give them as many tools and as much knowledge and wisdom as we possibly can, so that they can be successful.
Yeah, working together. I think, as I was going through my training, I think there was some health in like seeing other people and their drive and their dedication, and like using that as an inspiration.
Absolutely.
To work hard. And that's really good.
Yes.
That's really good. I can vividly remember actually going and flying. This was really early on. I was doing an aircraft transition into a Schweitzer from a Robinson. And we had a couple Schweitzers at the time, and I flew with an instructor, and he was helping me do the checkout, and we got back, and he landed the helicopter, and it was so buttery. It was one of those touchdowns where you just
Best
don't even
feeling
feel
and
it,
flying.
right? You don't even feel it. It's like all of a sudden he's putting the collective down, and you realize, oh shoot, I'm on the ground. And for me, that was one of those positive moments, right?
Yeah.
So I could have, in that moment, gotten really competitive and viewed him as like this threat to my advancement. But instead, I looked at it and I was like, man, I want to be that good.
Yeah.
I want to fly like that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some really good health when it comes to, that kind of not competitiveness, but just like driving each other to spurring each other on to be better.
Yeah, it's inspiration.
Yeah.
Right? You're inspired by somebody else's work ethic or somebody else's maneuver. And then how amazing would it be is if you then got encouragement from that person to say, yeah, you can. Yeah. And let me work with you. Right?
Yeah.
So that's huge for me, and that's how we get better as a group, right? Can't do it all ourselves.
So I seriously doubt he's going to be listening to this, but Damon Patrici, if you ever hear this, just know you inspired me.
We're still talking about that side down. That's great. No, I think that's actually a great segue into our next point, which is a willingness to be teachable and a willingness to learn. I think that the longer you're in this industry, if you're doing it and if you got the right focus and you're doing it the right way, I think you understand that you're never done learning. And, there's a lot of things that can get in your way, right? But I think if you continue and stay open to absorbing as much wisdom and as much knowledge as you possibly can from the people around you, I think ultimately you're going to continue to learn. You're going to keep yourself in that headspace where, it still is collaborative, right? But we can always get better. Yeah. And there's so many disciplines, and every discipline has this just bottomless depth of, knowledge that you could possibly go to. And you're not ever going to absorb everything to the absolute maximum. Everybody's going to find their specialities, that they're going to fall into. They're going to say, hey, I'm, these are my specialties, and here, and here. And then somebody's going to come along with a different topic and be like, wow, just a willingness to learn from people and a willingness to be teachable. That's really important for me in company training, because I'm going to take an instructor out periodically through points in their training when they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I'm taking them out, because I know that they're comfortable. And then I want to give them a little bit more to focus on and a little bit to kind of expand their horizon a little bit and say, why don't you think about this? Or I noticed you're doing this. Why don't you try that? Right. And because it's part of that development. I want them to be the best, the best pilots in the industry. That's what we want to put out. And, I can vividly remember flights where I am flying with an individual and trying to get them to expand their horizons and think about things in a little bit differently. That's going to help them and help them develop. And I get the response of, yeah. Oh, okay. I hear you. And that is just so frustrating environment to be in. And then ultimately their maneuvers are clear. They're not listening, and then they're not going to grow, or, worst case, they could try to make something up themselves. And that's even more dangerous, right? And
it really is.
Worst aircrafts that I've ever been in have been those instructional flights when the individual is clearly not interested in being teachable and learning.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think of our kind of chief team, right? Here, you, me, Reiner, and so often you guys are teaching me something, or the other way around, or we're constantly learning from each other.
Yeah,
and if you don't have that humbleness to actually receive that, you're not going to get better.
No.
You're always just going to be mediocre.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn to be teachable. And I think, we have people from all walks of life that start the training here. We have younger people, right out of high school or primary school, or, whatever it's called in your country. And then we have older people that, maybe have already had a career and they've always dreamed of flying helicopters, and they get here. And so, all these different types of people they're going to come with different backgrounds, different beliefs, different perspectives. And it's just so important to just keep an open mind.
Yeah.
And listen and hear the feedback that people might have. And I think as a student, if you ever find yourself thinking, oh, I know better than my instructor, you need to check yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, don't get me wrong. Your instructor can be wrong.
Oh yeah.
It's possible, right? We're all human.
Yes.
We all make mistakes. But if you find yourself in that kind of mentality, that moment when you're like, I don't need to listen to him. I think you need to take a step back.
Absolutely. Yeah. You honestly, that's going to follow you, and that's a bad habit and a hard one to break and to fix, because unfortunately that'll carry you through for a lot of jobs. And I mean, people wash out because nobody wants to work with them, or they bounce around a lot. And then that starts to look bad on your resume when you got 7 jobs in the last 4 years. People start raising their eyebrows and making phone calls. And as soon as somebody hears that they are hard to work with and they are not teachable, that is not somebody that, a lot of people want in operations. And so I love what you said. It's a humbleness.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I've been in a lot of aircraft, and, there's 10 ways to do anything. And, the more experience you get, the more you get to kind of measure those things and learn different perspectives and different situations. And because everything comes from, our flying experience and different scenarios, and you haven't seen something that, somebody else is trying to say, hey, you probably are going to see this coming up in your career. And so let me give you some tips right now. That's so valuable. That's so valuable information. And just be open to that. And yeah, flying, people get into their flying habits and they stick with it, but there's always different techniques that you can learn, and they're applicable in different scenarios. There's never something that can't be useful to you one day. So just absorb as much as you can and be as experienced and as knowledgeable pilot as you possibly can. And ultimately that's what we all dream about. So it's that humbleness. Okay. Last thing, and I think this is such a great segue, is a willingness to be wrong.
Yep. Yeah, we kind of already touched on it a little bit there,
Absolutely.
the willingness to learn, but the willingness to be wrong. I love that.
Yeah. I always told myself as an early CFI, I said, hey, look, and I tell my students to say the same things. Some things came up, and your students are going to show you where the holes are in your own instruction. That's a natural process of being a young CFI is you're going to say something and try to explain something. Your student's going to go, that doesn't sound quite right, or like, am I under?
That doesn't sound like what I read.
Yeah, that's not what the slide said, or I'm having a hard time understanding that.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have to, explain things in different ways, and it's easy to just make something up in the spot. It's kind of a defense mechanism that.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, and
it shouldn't, but it does.
It does. It absolutely does. And so it's really, really important for especially like a young CFI and a young pilot to say, you know what? I told myself, this was kind of my motto, my first, couple years as an instructor was, I'm just going to assume that I'm wrong.
There you
right?
go.
I'm just going to assume that I'm wrong. I'm going to look it up. And then if I'm wrong, I'm going to learn something. And then if I end up being right, I'm going to know that I'm right. Right. And so I'm going to have
feels better.
More confidence in that moment.
Well, and not only that, but in that moment, when you go back and you look at it and you read it again, it locks it in.
Locks it in.
As opposed to if you just try to make something up, then you got the wrong thing stuck in your head and it's stuck there forever.
And that takes a lot of rewiring. And that's great. Next time it comes up, you're like, haha, I already looked that up. And I feel good about it. And here's a good answer. And it's a confident answer that you can give your student. And early CFIs, they're going to struggle with that concept or maybe be a little bit uncomfortable with that concept. And I always like to encourage them. I'm like, hey, your student's going to be in your shoes, before this industry happens real fast, right? Yeah, your career develops real fast.
Yep.
Before they know it, they're going to be you. Teach them how to handle this situation. That's valuable. You
don't want to pass that down, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to pass on that negative attitude, that negative behavior of, making stuff up and not admitting to your own faults or your, or maybe something you inadvertently got wrong.
Yeah. We all get stuff wrong.
Passing that down to the next generation, it's just going to keep going.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Well, that's what my instructor told me. And I had something wrong. I think it was a very I clearly had this wrong. I was probably 6 months in as a CFI, and I called my old instructor and I said, hey, how do you do this? And he told me, and he goes, that's what I thought. And I said, actually, we're wrong. And he goes, well, buddy boy, it's your problem now. You fix it. And he goes, make sure those students don't keep getting wrong what we were getting wrong. And he just laughed about it because, it's okay. It's ultimately okay. I identify these things and then we fix them, right? It's just like you said, it's a humbleness. And, so funny, everything that we're talking about ties in together.
It really does.
It's just being open to learning and to growing.
Yeah. Being moldable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. And compassion for yourself and giving yourself plenty of grace to be like, I'm growing and learning in my career. And if you stay in that place, it's really admirable to the people around you, and it's identifiable in your students and in your coworkers and in your managers. Like people recognize that stuff. And for me, when I'm, choosing lead CFIs and assistant chiefs, that's really, really key points that I'm looking for because, I want it to be just as valuable to them stepping up into a position like that and learning from a position like that as they are in their work to me. And, we're building people up. That's what we do here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks guys for hanging on. I realized this podcast was a little bit longer than we normally do, but I think Eric and I could probably go on forever and ever about student success.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. Thank you guys. We hope this is valuable to you all. This is something that Jared and I are really passionate about, and we feel like that it matters a lot and something that we're extremely grateful to be able to talk to you guys about.
Yeah. So in recap, work together, be moldable, be flexible, be willing to be wrong, be teachable in all moments.
Yeah. Enjoy the ride.